Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Dyslexia Connect online tutoring video blog. Today I thought I would talk about dyslexia accommodations, or accommodations for students who have dyslexia. First of all, I thought it would be good to talk about the difference between two common terms that you probably heard or are going to hear at some point. When it comes to dyslexia, we sometimes talk about accommodations for dyslexia. We also talk about modifications for dyslexia. Now, the difference between these two is the fact that accommodations specifically refer to things that can help the student complete the regular assignment, the regular school assignment or regular test or something like that. So a good example might be if we think about a book that a student's required to read for school. So say they're given a reading assignment and the teacher says, please have this book read in 3 weeks, you'll be tested on it. And the student who has dyslexia has a really difficult time reading at the moment. They're reading fairly slow, and it's going to be very difficult for them to get through that book in that amount of time. An accommodation would be that they be allowed to use an audiobook. So instead of having to read the entire book, they actually are able to listen to the book as well, or maybe listen to the audiobook while they're reading along with it. That would be an example of an accommodation. Now, an example of modification is when something is actually changed for the student specifically. The actual assignment is changed. So if we think about a reading comprehension test, for example, if we say that the regular test is going to be 8 paragraphs long and contain 20 questions, a modification of that might be that the test is modified to be 3 paragraphs long and only 3 or 4 questions or 5 questions. So that's a situation where something is actually being modified, it's being changed for that specific student. So that's the difference between accommodations and modifications. And you'll hear those two terms thrown out there a lot, so it's good to know the difference between them just so you can be aware of what somebody is talking about specifically and the differences between those two things. So today I'm going to talk about accommodations for dyslexia. Now, accommodations can be available in school. Sometimes to get accommodations for a child who has dyslexia, you will need to either have an IEP or a 504 for them. So that's something that's going to be there are going to be accommodations built into those things, and there's going to be more flexibility probably when a student has one of those things, and you can outline various accommodations in the IEP plan or the educational plan that's written up for the student. Otherwise, you may also be able to get accommodations for a student who has dyslexia if you simply speak to the school administrators or the teacher, the classroom teacher, and mention that the child has dyslexia, and these are some things that would really help them excel in class and show their true potential if they're allowed to use these things or have access to these things in class. So let's talk about some of those today. I'm going to talk about some different types of accommodations. First of all, accommodations with materials. Then I'm going to discuss some accommodations for homework, some accommodations that can help in the classroom, and then also accommodations for tests. So first of all, let's talk about accommodations with materials. One of the really advantageous accommodations that you can get for a student who has dyslexia is the use of audiobooks. So if they are assigned a big assignment for reading, like I mentioned in that example, they have to read a big book by a certain point. A great tool for them can be an audiobook. You can get that book on audio and they're able to listen to it. For many students with dyslexia, before they get the specific help they need to improve their reading and improve their reading comprehension can be a difficult thing for them. And so even if they're reading a book and getting through it, they may not be comprehending it very well. An audiobook can often help with comprehension because a lot of students who have dyslexia have very good audio comprehension, but not necessarily reading comprehension. And at this point, I should also mention, when you realize that your child has dyslexia, before you start seeking out accommodations for them, I would really encourage you to seek out the specific help that they need to improve their reading and spelling. So in that way, they're going to be getting the help that they need with their reading, their spelling, their comprehension. And eventually they probably won't need many of these accommodations in school because they'll have improved a lot in those areas. So that's the first thing to do when you find out that your child has dyslexia, seek out the specific help for them that's going to help them improve their reading, spelling, and comprehension. And then once you do that, you have that in place, you can also seek out these accommodations which will help them do well in school while their reading and spelling are improving and their comprehension are improving. So audiobooks, great resource. You can often find audiobooks in a public library system. You can order them on interlibrary loan. You may be able to find them at the school's library specifically. There are also a lot of online resources these days. A lot of library systems have archives of audiobooks, and if you have a library card, you can go onto that site and you can get audiobooks for all kinds of different things. There are also some special services like Bookshare. Bookshare is a very popular one these days, and if a student has a diagnosis of dyslexia, or their dyslexia tutor, for example, fills out a form for them saying that they do have dyslexia and they show the signs of dyslexia, they may be able to get a free membership with Bookshare, and Bookshare has all kinds of audiobooks available. So it's a really, really wonderful resource. So if a student has to read a book in a class, there's almost always an audiobook version to be found somewhere that you can obtain to help them be able to get through that book for the assignment. Another good accommodation for materials would be simplified or highlighted directions. So if a student gets an assignment at school, you could ask the teacher to do this, to highlight specifically the things that the student's supposed to do with the highlighter, or if you're the parent, you can do that yourself as well. You can go ahead and look at the assignments and boil the assignments or the directions down to a couple basic phrases, a couple basic important phrases that are going to guide the student through the assignment. So if you read the paragraph instructions, you might highlight, well, this is step 1, that's step 2, that's step 3. Or sometimes the teacher might be willing to actually give simplified versions of the directions, and so that the student can go ahead and follow those. So those are some great accommodations for materials. Now let's talk about accommodations for homework. A lot of times homework can be really difficult and time consuming for a student who has dyslexia. Doing basic assignments that take one student maybe a half an hour to do or 45 minutes can take them hours to complete just because of the dyslexia. So some things that can help with homework, first of all, are step-by-step directions. And these are really, really great because the step-by-step directions will make it easier for the student who has dyslexia to organize their thoughts and to follow those directions. So they can go step by step and mark off, okay, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that as well. Also, step-by-step directions are great for anybody who's helping the student work on their homework. Because sometimes you might have had the experience where a student brings home an assignment and you have the assignment outline, what the assignment's supposed to be, but you don't necessarily have the directions. And the student may or may not be able to give you information about how you're supposed to do that assignment. So if you have step-by-step directions, you can take a look at it and say, oh, okay, I understand now exactly what we're supposed to do, and you can help them write that essay or do that project or whatever they are supposed to do. So that's a really, really good resource, and that's something that teachers may be able to provide. If the teachers are not able to provide that, you may want to just take the assignment and boil it down to more basic sentences yourself. You could go ahead and read the paragraph and say, well, these are the main points, just type out a quick paragraph giving step-by-step directions of what the student is supposed to do. Something else that can help a lot with homework are notes on the lessons that the teacher is teaching in class. These are very helpful because, as I mentioned previously, you may be helping the student with an assignment, but they're not really sure what was said about something in class, so they're not sure how to explain it, and this can help you be more of a help to them when you're helping with homework. Step-by-step, detailed notes on the lessons. Also, these notes can be great because taking notes in class can often be difficult for a student who has dyslexia or dysgraphia or both. So if they have detailed notes, they aren't necessarily going to have to worry about writing all those things down in class because that's very difficult and time-consuming for them. Another thing to mention about notes, a great way to get notes as well is to take a picture of the whiteboard. A lot of teachers are allowing this these days, so If your student happens to have a phone with them or something else they can take pictures with when they're in class, they can go ahead and take those pictures and bring them home, and they can look at the pictures to get the exact details about what was included in that lesson. If the teacher doesn't have lesson notes to give out, specific lesson notes, they may have their own outlines that they use for teaching the class. And sometimes teachers would be willing to give out these notes for parents to use at home, even though most of the students don't necessarily take them home. They might make an exception for a child with dyslexia and give them the outlines to bring home, and this can be another useful tool. Some accommodations in the classroom that can help a student with dyslexia are extra time to read and write material. So, of course, as we know, a student who has dyslexia may be struggling with reading, most likely is struggling with reading, and they tend to not read as fast as their peers. And so having extra time to read in class is going to allow them to be able to get through the assignments and be able to keep up even if they aren't reading as fast as their peers in class. And this goes the same with written material. If they can have more time to gather their thoughts and write out the material, that's really going to help. In terms of written assignments, if they have to fill out short answers or different things like that, written responses to things that they're learning in class, something that's really going to help them is a sentence starter. So often children with dyslexia have a hard time organizing their thoughts and even beginning sentences. So something that can really help is an example of a sentence starter. So if they are supposed to write what they think is interesting about elephants, for example, a sentence starter would be, one of the most interesting things about elephants is, and then they can go on from there. And sometimes if they just get that little boost, that helps get the wheels turning in their heads, and they can go ahead and start to write the sentence after that. Another great classroom accommodation is an example of the correct work that they're doing. So if they get a certain assignment in class, if the teacher can give them an example of the work filled out and it's correct, that's really going to help them get an idea of what they're supposed to do and also follow the directions. This also works with homework. If the teacher is able to give them an example of, for example, a paragraph that's supposed to be written about something and give them a good example about that, that's going to make it a little bit clearer for them and make it easier for them to do the assignment. Now, we also talk about a lot of accommodations when it comes to tests. So one of the best accommodations you can get for a student who has dyslexia regarding tests is extra time taking those tests. Since they are probably going to have a more difficult time reading the material than their peers and maybe organizing their responses, additional time will help them relax more and help the teacher to get a more accurate assessment of how well they know the material by giving them extra time. They can have extra time to read at their own pace, and if it requires writing, also extra time to write their answers, especially if it requires short answers. Something else that might help is a quiet space to take tests. Sometimes students who have dyslexia, since reading can be very difficult for them, they tend to get distracted if there's other noise in class, different things going on, and sometimes they can get a separate room to take tests in. This might be the office of a teacher that they're able to go into, or just a separate classroom during tests, and that's an accommodation that can also help children with dyslexia do well on tests. So those are some good accommodation suggestions, and those are some accommodations that are fairly well known. And if you're seeking out an IEP or a 504 for your student, those are maybe things that you want to suggest. And as with all accommodations, it's really important to determine what things might actually help the specific student, because some students may be helped greatly by one sort of accommodation, but not so much by others. And so if you know your student well and know the specific struggles they're having, you can figure out which accommodations would really help, and then go ahead and request those from the teacher or the administration or during your IEP meeting. So, thanks a lot for watching today. If you're interested in our online tutoring program, you can find more information about that at www.dyslexiaconnect.com. If you're interested in connecting with us, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you like the video you watched today, you can go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll be seeing other videos come down the pipeline that discuss different aspects of dyslexia. So, thanks a lot for watching today. I'm Peter with Dyslexia Connect, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.